Welcome back to the Resource Doula Podcast. Today's episode is a little different than normal. You guys all know I created this podcast to provide you with more information so you can make your best informed healthcare decisions for yourself and your family. So I'm obviously passionate about encouraging you to take an active role in your health. Today's episode about the state of midwifery care in Alaska is going to equip you with information that you need to help make lasting change, not only for Alaskan families, but potentially make midwifery care more accessible nationwide. So even if you're not a local Alaskan, please keep listening and send this episode to a few friends. Together, we can make a big difference in the birth options that are available in our country. Today, I have Rachel and Mary, two local Alaska midwives and birth advocates, on the show to talk about the status of licensed midwifery in the state of Alaska, statute changes, and how midwifery care as we know it is on the line and up for a vote in a matter of days. We talk about how you can make a direct impact and help protect birth options for families, even if you don't live here. I'm your host, Natalie, and I'm thrilled to introduce our guests. First up, Rachel. Rachel is a wife, mother, grandmother, and midwife. She was a childbirth educator, a La Leche League leader, and a certified ICEA birth doula and doula trainer for years before becoming a midwife. She has a home birth practice in Eagle River that supports women in Anchorage, Eagle River, Palmer, Sutton, Wasilla, and Willow, and she travels all over the state supporting women having home births in communities where there are currently no midwives. She is also the vice chair on the State Board of Midwifery. You can find Rachel on social media with the handle Traditional Roots Midwifery. Next up is Mary. Mary is a homeschooling and homesteading mama in Wasilla at the base of Mount Baldy and abutting the Little Sioux. She had 5 boys before she got a little girl, but the 3-year-old girl rules the roost around their homestead. Mary began her journey in caring for women and babies a decade ago. After her own experiences in the mainstream medicalized system, she sought out more education, more empowerment, and more wholesome, holistic care. She is passionate about education and informed consent. She is even more passionate about autonomy and fighting the coercion of some philosophies. She owns her own midwifery practice, Valor Midwifery Services, and cares for women desiring home birth and birth center birth. While she doesn't own her own birth center and is adamant that she never will, she is very thankful to have the ability to bring her families to 3 local birth centers if that is what they desire. Mary loves home birth, the ability for a mama to be in her own space, have her comforts of her own home surrounding her, feel the safety and security of the walls of her home with the support of her midwife who comes to her. That is what Mary feels works best physiologically and emotionally. Mary also often talks about traditional concepts of midwifery care where each community had a midwife and there was a midwife in each community. Her work in helping with the update of Alaskan midwifery statutes speaks to her desire to see more midwives in the communities and more personalized midwifery care for each family. You can find Mary on social media with the hashtag MaryAK Midwife. That's MERRYMARY. AK Midwife, or her business page, Valor Midwifery Services on Facebook. Mary and Rachel, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here today.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Natalie.
Absolutely. Okay, I brought you on because the state of Alaska has some big changes coming up for midwifery and care, postpartum care, preconception care. So can you guys just, whoever wants to go first, talk about how you're involved and kind of what the current state is and where we're headed?
Okay. Do you want to go first, Rachel, or you want me to?
I'll let you go first.
All right. So I am a midwife here in Alaska, so that's why I'm involved on the cusp of it. But I'm really involved in helping move things through because I, a couple years ago, was elected as our president of the Midwives Association of Alaska. So it's our professional organization. And as president, one of pretty much my whole platform was to educate the public about midwives and make sure that midwifery is continuing to move forward and evolve with changes, and also to advocate for all of us midwives and our families that we care for. So when the board was making these changes and proposing everything to go through the statutes and all those statutes updates, I got really involved, and here I am. Famous last words. Seemed like an easy gig in the beginning because you're just hosting a professional meeting once a month, and now it's like practically a full-time job to stay involved. But it's good. It's been great.
I'm a local midwife here in Alaska also, but I do sit on the state board of midwifery. And we were tasked with a legislative audit to change our statutes and regulations to bring them up to national standards, because this is a huge movement with the maternity care crisis that's going on in our country, including in Alaska. Everybody thinks, oh, well, that's just down the lower 48. It's not down the lower 48. We have huge maternity care deserts in Alaska ourselves. There are lots of communities where there are there are no midwives, which there should be a midwife in every community. That's my goal, right, is to get a midwife in every single community back in Alaska, the way it used to be. But there's a lot of communities that don't have OBs. There's a lot of communities that don't have hospitals. And women are having to travel in their pregnancies to come to the larger areas to have their babies when, if there were midwives in their area, granted, if they were high risk, yep, they would probably still have to come to Anchorage or Juneau or fly down to Seattle, wherever their closest hub is. But the majority of these women are having to travel from communities to come into larger communities due to lack of care in their current community. So we undertook the big project of statutes and regulation changes, which has not been done for close to 30 years in the state of Alaska. There's been little projects here and there, add this, take that out, but this is kind of like a big overhaul, which was seriously needed to be done, for sure.
So not all of the listeners of this podcast are all over the world, not just in Alaska. So if somebody is outside like a more populated area or city, like if they're receiving any prenatal care, where does that come from if there's no midwives or OBs in that community?
So it's my understanding that a lot of the communities might have a local small health clinic, and so they might receive care through the traveling nurse or the traveling doctor that comes once a month or however often they're coming. But a lot of them are just going without care. Rachel does a lot of travel midwifery, and she goes into communities and, there is no hospital at all there, or there is, one nurse practitioner that is coming once a month. And there is nobody really there to provide care.
So if somebody is not going free birth, they're not just birthing on their own, they're traveling, then what does that look like? Like when do they decide to travel to Anchorage or Juneau or a larger area?
So typically it's up to their provider or whoever they're coordinating with. But right now I have a mom under my care that lives in Wrangell, and she loves her little town of Wrangell. And they sent her off the island at 35 and a half weeks because she was having some contractions, and they thought she might be in labor. So they medevaced her out, and she rode a helicopter, and she got a first class ticket to Providence. She wants a birth center birth ultimately. And so, for a minute we were like, you can't have a birth center birth if you're preterm. But anyways, her labor stopped, and she's now just waiting. Her husband is still home in Wrangell because he has to work, and that's where they live. And she's waiting to go into labor, but it's not easy on them. And thankfully it's their first baby, so they don't have a bunch of kids in the house that, they're trying to logistically coordinate. Mom is gone for a month or more because she has to go to town to have a baby. Ideally, and Wrangell is a big enough community, like this person in particular, Wrangell is a big enough community that they have a clinic there, and she was under the care of nurse practitioners and then coordinating with me because that's where she wants to deliver. But Wrangell still, they don't do they don't do any births on the island at all. Like if you have a baby on Wrangell,
Okay.
it was totally by accident. And it
Wow.
happened really fast because they couldn't fly you out in time. So usually, long
Okay.
story short, it's about 36 weeks because they don't want you to deliver on
Okay. And then how long? Makes sense
Yeah, so
if they're not prepared for it.
No, so they'll leave their communities at 36 weeks, stay in town until they deliver, but then they stay for 6 weeks postpartum.
Wow, because they receive that 6 week up until that 6 week
And
mark.
if you think about these
And
families,
then they,
That's a long time
it
away
is.
from home.
So it's a logistical nightmare for just the family themselves. But then if you think about the cost, their insurance is covering all that, not just the flight and the medical care, but their hotel, their housing, their meals, travel vouchers if they need to get a taxi cab to go to their appointments. Like, it's a huge cost versus train up more midwives
Yeah.
and get a midwife in each community, or at least close to their community.
Right. How long has it been that way? Like how long ago was it that there were midwives in every community?
well, unfortunately, that happened. That was when licensure actually happened. When licensure in Alaska happened, there were a lot of traditional midwives
Okay.
that were in the remote villages and such, but they didn't want a license. And what that did is that made them now illegal to practice. So they stopped.
Wow. Wow.
So,
Okay, can you talk a little bit more about that? What licensure means, and I guess why it's important, and why you guys are fighting for it or talking about it more with the board?
licensure, when it first started, was a good movement forward, because before we were basically like what's called an illegal state, where midwives weren't illegal, but they also weren't considered in the healthcare profession, right? So
Direct entry midwives.
right,
Yeah, traditional
direct entry
midwives.
So then,
And weren't able to bill
Yep.
insurance.
all
Okay.
cost, right? All cost was out of pocket
Wow.
when you're illegal, because you can't bill for insurance. There's certain medications you can't carry because you're not licensed, right? Then you're dealing with a totally different set of handling emergencies differently than what we can now. So being
Okay.
licensed has huge advantages for midwives, because then there are meds that we can carry, there are procedures that we can do. We can bill your insurance, so it's a lot less out-of-pocket cost for families. So it does have its advantages, yes, right? It does kind of make sure that everyone has equal training. That doesn't mean traditional midwives did not know what they were doing. I am not saying that at all. But it just kind of changed things. And some of the traditional midwives, they just didn't want to change what they were doing. So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
Okay, so all of the cost of people traveling into town, and potentially like a spouse coming in with them, and taxis and places to stay, does the state of Alaska foot any of that bill? Or is it all insurance
If they
companies?
have Medicaid, or state of Alaska Medicaid is Denali Kid Care. If they have that, then yes, they have to do some paperwork with their provider to make sure that Medicaid will cover it. But yes, it is part of their health care because there is no access to care at their home.
Right. So that would be why it would be beneficial to have midwives in, for not only clientele and patients, but for taxpayers, right? That's less money
The state is paying.
outgo
Right.
money.
Yeah, the state of Alaska is
Yeah.
putting the bill for
Okay.
anyone that is covered that is coming from out of town. Yeah. In addition to all of their medical.
Do you guys have any stats? Right. Do you have any stats on that? Like how much
I think
Alaska is spending on?
somebody pulled some numbers, and on the top of my head, I think it's 40% of babies born, their mother had Medicare or Medicaid. Yeah.
Okay.
So 40% of the
Medicaid.
babies born
Like
in
the cost
Alaska
of-
are covered under Medicaid. And that would encompass all the babies born in Alaska, whether they lived in Anchorage or they lived in
Yeah.
the outlying areas and had to be flown in.
Okay.
But I don't think anybody's ever run the number on cost
No.
of how much that would cost, like how much it costs the state to fly moms in and having a place to stay. And it covers, I want to say, 2 meals per day, taxis if they need to, get to appointments or to the hospital or what have you. And then flights and, there's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot. Yeah.
There is a lot.
Yeah. Logistics. Holy cow. I'm just thinking through all of that. And yeah, like you were saying, if a family already has kids at home and they're young, especially, they need family or friends to watch them. Does a spouse or partner always come with the
Not
mom
always.
giving birth?
It doesn't make sense for everybody to bring their partner because they might have to watch the kids or they might have to continue working.
Right.
Yeah. So that's another facet of it is mom doesn't have her support person.
Right. Right. Oh man, there's a lot of layers to this that I haven't fully thought through. So what is being done as far as the statute changes to midwifery care in general? What's coming down the
With the
pipeline?
statutes changes,
Like, what
I'll
are the
just touch
changes?
on it a little bit because I know Rachel is the one that's the expert, but I want to make sure that I get my 2 cents in. So
Go for it.
we're one of our talking points is that we are going to grow up more midwives here in Alaska, which is going to increase access to care for our community families. And how are we doing that? Because we are streamlining the licensure process. We're streamlining the ability for midwives from other states that are already licensed to come into Alaska, get their Alaska license, and start practicing. We're streamlining the process for apprentices. We're streamlining the process for the preceptors that are here training new midwives. So we are hopefully, it's not going to happen overnight. We have to get people to come and then retain the midwives that are here. One of the big deals in Alaska that we've seen over the past decade is retention problem. The midwives that were already here and practicing some of them can't afford to maintain their license because of the cost of the license. It has been so expensive to be a practicing midwife in Alaska because our licensing fees have been so high that a lot of them have retired or they've moved or, they're choosing not to relicense.
Wow.
So we're losing our ability to care for people because there's not enough midwives in Alaska. And we are losing the ability to train up more midwives because it's too much of a process for apprentices to go through their apprenticeship programs. All right. Rachel.
Those are important points.
No, it's really important though, because that is a huge part of what's happening right now. We used to, I think our maximum was close to 75 midwives in our state.
Okay.
And when we kind of did this, it's not an official consensus, a kind of general consensus, we're going to be down to like the last time we checked less than 30.
Yeah.
Whoa, that is significant.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it has a lot to do
for the entire state.
For the entire state, not just one area.
And we're all concentrated into the areas of Anchorage, the Matt Valley, and Juneau. So most of us practice in those areas, and then outlying areas have nobody. Between Meadow Lakes and Fairbanks, there's no midwives. None. Like Willow, Talkeetna, Healy, Cantwell. All the families that are in those areas have to go to either Fairbanks or the Valley, or have a crazy midwife that is willing to drive 2 hours to care for them.
Oh, I'd be that crazy midwife.
I was just going to say, Rachel is laughing right now.
Yeah.
I can see that. Yeah. So you guys are extremely taking on a lot of the load because, Alaska leads the nation in out-of-hospital birth. So these 30-some midwives are taking on all of that, which is, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
that puts it into a lot of
Yeah.
perspective.
So we
We
want
need help.
more midwives.
We need more.
No kidding.
When I was a
Yes.
student, I feel like I'm taking over the conversation, sorry. But when I was a student, and Rachel was a student as well, we felt like an apprentice on every corner. There were apprentices as much as you could find like a coffee shop. Tons of apprentices. But because of some changes in the state regulations and the dynamics of the cost of licensing, not just for the midwives, but for the students, the cost of being a student, we have hardly any students right now. And for the past few years, there have been hardly any students. So there's not very many new midwives. There's the older midwives that came through, and they're still sticking around, but there's hardly any new midwives like for the past few years.
Wow. Can you quickly walk us through the process of what it looks like to become a midwife in the state of Alaska?
Yes. So
if it can be quick, I mean, it can be long
you're
too.
Fine. You have to choose a program. So there's most of the time people will choose an online program and do your didactic education through that online program. Finish the coursework, and usually you're doing that in conjunction with your in-person clinical training. And the in-person clinical training is done with a preceptor who is a licensed midwife here in Alaska and also has done her preceptor certification to show that she is able to teach. She's not a brand new midwife herself.
Okay.
She has experience and she has a practice, and she's not just bringing on somebody and then is going to take advantage of them for 5 years. She is going to train them up and help them get their license. And typically it's a 2 to 3 year process.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Yeah. Okay. And I can see how all of those different moving parts can play into how, like, the barriers to the student has to get apprenticeship rights or licensure or permitting or whatever, and then the preceptor has to go through training. Like, yeah, there's a lot in place that needs to happen.
And the work that Rachel and the board has done, they've successfully been able to make it so that it's more of a streamlined process and it's a more affordable process, not just for us midwives, but for the students as well. The opportunity to get a student permit in Alaska used to be like $1,800, and you would have to do that every 2 years just to say, I'm a preceptor.
Wow.
I mean, I'm a student and am able to have an apprenticeship. And then in this past month, the board finalized their regulation project, and it's now $300. So they've essentially taken the huge burden off of the student and financially made it a lot more accessible.
That's exciting. That's great.
And we removed the MEC accredited schooling requirement.
Okay.
Because that was a huge financial burden for a lot of the new midwives. It's a college level course without transferability. So you get a non-transferable bachelor's degree in midwifery through a MEC accredited school, but it could also cost you $40,000. So when you're looking at having to pay $40,000 for a degree, then spend 2 years of your life unpaid, because apprentices are not paid for all of their work that they're doing to get all of their skills and their clinical experience done. That's a lot of money and a lot of time without income to be able to become a midwife. So we tried to make it more affordable because it has been proven that there is no difference between the skills that a midwife who does the online training instead of the MEC accredited schools has between a MEC and a non-MEC student. So a lot of their training comes from their hands-on experience with that midwife, their preceptor.
That makes sense.
Yep.
That makes a lot of sense.
So we wanted to make it more affordable and easier for people to do. Because once that MEC requirement hit our regulations, that's honestly when all of the apprenticeships stopped because people just couldn't afford it.
Yeah. And are those the MEEC accredited schools more so in person rather than
There's
online?
none in the state of Alaska.
Okay.
Yeah.
So someone would have to travel if they wanted to go to an
There's
in-person
plenty
school.
of opportunity for them to do fulfill those courses online, but it is much more of a university-led style of an education. The burden of credits, the type of classes that you're required to attend, all of that.
So the non-MEEC accredited coursework is a lot more cost effective.
Yes, and it hones into midwifery training only. It hones into your midwifery training and not so much all the other like college type of requirements.
Nice. Hey, you guys are like taking down the walls one at a time.
Yes.
I like it. I like it.
Yes.
Okay, so what are some of the other statute changes?
The biggest one is we will be changing our name from certified direct entry midwife, which is a non-recognizable title by insurance companies, to licensed midwife, because they understand what that is, and that's in their verbiage. What that does in the long scope of things is it makes midwifery more affordable for Alaskan families. The two biggest insurance companies right now in our state, Aetna and Cigna, will not pay for home birth. They will pay for your prenatal care with a licensed midwife. They will pay for your postpartum care with a licensed midwife, but then they won't cover the actual home birth fee itself, professional fee. And then, so then therefore that financial burden with, their monthly payments to their insurance so that they can have insurance, and their normal deductibles, and then their normal co-pays all still apply, but then they would have that out-of-pocket cost of the home birth fee. And a lot of people, it's a financial reality. They just don't have that kind of cash laying around. Not to mention, why aren't they paying it? All the other insurance companies pay it. But it is in their policy handbooks that the reason they're not paying it is because it's not state mandated in our state statutes. So we put verbiage in there so that they are required then to pay for home birth. So that that is no longer a burden for Alaskan families if that is their choice. Again, women should have that choice to birth where and with whom and how they would want to.
Yeah, agreed. This makes me very excited. I always feel like it's like a stab in the heart, when somebody says, oh, I would have a home birth and I'm all set for that. But my insurance won't cover it. So I'm going to the hospital. And like, obviously their choice and everything. But if they wanted that home birth experience and the only thing holding them back is the financial piece, then
it should not be there for them.
Yeah,
exactly.
Or even, I've recently talked to a mom who has an Aetna policy that she pays out the nose for every month, who said, I just realized that you are not in network and they won't cover my home birth. And I said, yeah, I know. I've tried to get a network with Aetna. Their hoops to jump through are not feasible for my practice. But I can work with you on, all of those fees and stuff. I don't want you to have to feel that burden. And she said, good, because what I would do if I can't have you come to my birth, if I can't afford it, is I would just have a free birth. And, I will not downplay the option for people to choose free birth. But if someone wants a midwife and they have an amazing insurance plan that they're paying $800 a month for, that insurance plan should cover the medical care that they choose that they want to have.
Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, that's bleak. I can't. I can't imagine. Do you think that it is insurance companies' agenda to like push out home birth? No. Or is it just how the cookie crumbled in Alaska?
I think at the end of the day, insurance companies just try really hard not to pay anybody. So we have to be able to organize and stand up to them and say, no, your clients, your customers that are paying all of their premiums are requesting this service, and it's very reasonable that you should cover it. So I think at the end of the day, they're not necessarily trying to isolate and, push us away. I hope not. Maybe I'm naive in saying that. I think they're just, they're really good at accepting money from their policyholders, and they do their best to negotiate down what they're paying out. And midwives and doctors alike are always negotiating with insurance companies. I probably have 50 faxes a day from policy companies or insurance companies that are trying to offer me a lower price. And Rachel's nodding her head as well. I get, because they'll send it 2 or 3 or 4 times to see if you'll take a lower fee. And at first, before I knew any better, I was like, okay, I'll accept it. I'll accept your negotiated down price. And then a biller told me, oh, don't do that. Just wait them out. Wait another week or 2 and they'll come through with their actual price that you're asking for. So
wow.
This is their name of their game.
I hate that it's such a game that you have to play.
Yeah. But I don't know if that's exclusive to midwifery. I think it's healthcare in general. Insurance companies just do that with all providers, I think.
I don't know. I don't think they're calling up hospitals asking them if they'd take less.
Maybe not.
We should ask around and see.
Just saying.
We should talk to a hospital biller and ask them.
You should. I think I would be very curious to know that. I was going to say if you are faith-based, if you have a client who's faith-based, the cost sharing programs will often cover the entirety of home birth, but they see pregnancy as a pre-existing condition, so you have to sign up prior to actually getting pregnant. So just another hoop to jump through.
If you're going that route, make sure you have your policy in place before you get pregnant, like a month before at least.
Yep.
Man, what women have to go through to get the care that they deserve.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Speaking of the care that women deserve, you're extending, or insurance is extending, I guess I should say, your postpartum care abilities for 12 months. Is that correct?
That's part of one of the changes in the statute, Bill.
And it's not just that insurance will pay. Right now, state of Alaska restricts us. We can't see someone after 6 weeks. So it's considered outside of our scope of practice. Whereas nationally, we have the 12-month scope of practice for postpartum. But yes, Rachel was able to add that to the statutes update, and that's going to be a game changer. It'll be a game changer for moms and families.
No kidding. I mean, it takes a year to recover from childbirth, if not more. Yes. So it just makes sense. Like Oh, you're a rock star, Rachel. I'm impressed with you.
I don't know about that, and we also included preconception care, which we do right now when women call us up and say, hey, what can I do? I'm thinking about getting pregnant in the next 6 months. Tell me what I can do. Then we meet for coffee and we chat with them. But
you're not getting paid for that.
Right. And it can't be part of their medical record. And, we're not ordering labs and, doing all those things.
Right.
But now you can.
Yeah, if that statute change passes, we'd be able to help women ahead of time, get some labs done, see if there are some deficiencies we can work on, and then move forward from there, then do their pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. But yes, then the postpartum would extend that whole next year, which is great.
Man, that's incredible. Yeah. I mean, it makes so much sense, like to be able to walk alongside somebody from preconception all the way to a year postpartum. Like if somebody had that support, like just think of how much better mental health is going to be. Think how much better, like community is going to be. I don't know. I'm very, very excited about all of this. And yeah, like people's pelvic floors, they're going to be okay because they're talking to someone about them regularly and not having just that 6-week checkup and like, okay, see ya, like can't do anything more after this point.
Right.
So a lot of people get like birth control right at that 6-week mark. Is that because they can't come back after that point?
Yeah, so that's kind of
Or
so
can't, quote unquote, can't?
just to make sure that your listeners understand, birth control is not in the scope of practice of licensed midwives, but a prescribed birth control can be achieved through a nurse midwife or a PRN or a doctor. A family practice doctor can do it as well. But yes, that is the policy. That's where the 6-week checkup really came from, is 6 weeks you are considered fully postpartum, and that's when you should be started on your birth control plan.
Interesting. So I wonder too, like if people are choosing to go in hormonal birth control and they're seeing potential issues or imbalances from that in their postpartum season, then maybe if they have extended care, they would wait longer and things might be more balanced if they choose to still go that route.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. That's where my brain is going.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm all about the balance.
If you could check in and talk with your midwife once a month, yeah, there would be a lot of things we could be discussing, including that. Like, am I actually fertile right now? What does that look like?
Right.
Different for everybody, but we could be talking about all of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure you guys
screenings. That's a big one.
Yes.
That we'd be able to do for moms, and help them get the care that they need.
Because you guys can do referrals at that point, right? If you're doing a postpartum depression screen and get a positive screen, if that's Yes. Yeah. And you probably already talked to people up till 12 months or longer, I'm sure.
Yeah,
we do.
Even people that have, we had a baby 5 years ago, they'll still text or call and say, hey, this has nothing to do with my pregnancy and postpartum, but I trust you in your opinion. Like, who can I go and see? And so we can help facilitate those referrals or just, recommendations.
Yeah. Amazing. I'm just impressed by you guys. And I'm really excited that you get to be paid more for what you already are offering the community. Okay, so how do we get the statute bill to pass? What does that look like?
That's a Rachel question.
That looks like lots of letters. That's what that looks like, right? We have an online petition on change.org that people can go on there and sign. If you don't have the direct link, which I can give to Natalie so she can post it, you just look up Alaska Midwives on change.org and it'll pop right up. So they can go on there and sign. And then we are going to be having the bill coming out hopefully this week, fingers crossed. I was texting the representative earlier today. And as soon as that bill comes out, then we'll have a bill number. And so if people want to like pre-write a letter, and Natalie had even said she's willing to kind of help by giving kind of like a template.
Absolutely.
Yep, for people to use. You can use that template and tweak it however you'd like to tweak it with the bill number and email it in. And it would be, you'd want to email it to your representatives, your state representative and your senator in your area, so that you're getting their attention. But then we'll have specific people, and Natalie can have those email addresses too, with that template letter as to who it goes directly to. So the people who are sponsoring it through the Senate and through the House. And then therefore, the more letters we get, I've heard the magic number is 500. And what they do with them when your letter gets sent in is they literally print them off and it goes into a folder with the bill. So when it goes from committee to committee to committee, this nice big old thick folder shows up and they're like, oh, that could be a lot of angry constituents if we don't pass this.
Okay.
So that is literally how that works, right? So the more people we can get in to write in letters of support, the better, and the more recognition that bill takes.
Okay.
So
Yeah, and I'm going to write like a prefab letter that people can take and personalize. And I'll put that in a Google Doc and I'll link it in the show notes along with the petition
Awesome.
so people
fantastic.
can easily find
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
That'd be great.
Can people outside of Alaska sign the petition
Yeah.
on change.org?
They
Absolutely.
sure can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Because
all of
you know
my
they may be
listeners.
the grandma of somebody who lives here, or sister, or best friend, or whatever. That it's anyone who believes, and I encourage dads to sign them, and grandpas and grandmas to sign them, because we need midwifery to stay alive in the state of Alaska, and this does nothing but benefit the women here. It
And
really does.
Yeah.
I mean,
nationally,
it kind of sounds like yes.
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. It kind of sounds like there's benefits to the midwives, and it's really just opening our scope of practice to help more demographics of women in our state, and just more women in our state, period, if they knew about midwifery and what we offer. And then if they didn't have the financial burden of having to pay for things they shouldn't be paying for since they have insurance out of pocket, then, the grandmothers and the sisters and the aunts and the uncles and the dads should be writing in those letters also, saying, my wife had a fabulous experience with midwife Mary. Great, write that in. They they need to hear that. They really do.
So the more personalized the letters, the better.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I was going to say, this is not just an Alaska issue. This is a national issue. So even somebody that's listening to your podcast in another state, maybe you're in a state where you don't have legal licensure, or you don't have access to midwives in your community. If you support us here in Alaska, we can ripple down and help change other states. Like, we have to be able to support midwifery nationwide in order to really make a big difference in those national numbers. If you look at the national statistics, Alaska has the highest amount of babies being born outside of the hospital with midwives. That's a given. And it's been that way for many decades. But nationally, we're only getting about 2% of the babies that are being born total in America being born with midwives outside of the hospital. Only about 2%.
Wow. I didn't realize it was that
Yes.
low.
And so we need to have a national conversation. And if they can look to Alaska and see that Alaskan midwives have great statistics, we have excellent outcomes. We have an excellent integrated model of care where our midwives are well respected. We can show up at the hospital with our families, and we can transition to the hospital if we need to. We can be a great example of how you can get good insurance coverage and licensure processes. Like, all of that thing can be a national conversation. But first we have to do it here in Alaska.
Yeah.
Well, because a lot of people don't realize there are quite a few states in our free United States that midwifery is actually illegal because of their state statutes. So, like, when I was writing the statutes, the place that I went to is I called up our national certifying organization. I said, is there somebody here that can help me write basically a midwifery constitution, right? I would like it to be a living document. And so they did help me. And they said, right, they're like, hey, if you get this passed, this looks fantastic and great. This could be a template. So, like what Mary said, states that are illegal, great, use us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
would be awesome.
That's why we're trying to get this pushed through. It does help our Alaskan families, but it could potentially help other states.
So the bill is up for vote very soon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Today is the 20th. We're recording on the 20th.
I know, right? Today's the 20th.
So
Spring equinox.
first,
is.
the whole legislative process is totally cumbersome, but it's whatever it is. It has to get brought out of legal and presented to the House floor and the Senate floor, and there it gets assigned a bill number on the House side and the Senate side. So you'll have HB bill number whatever and Senate bill number whatever. And then once we have those bill numbers, then it's alive. And it's no longer just in theory. This is an actual legislation, a bill that the legislators can talk about and discuss in their committees and then ultimately vote on. It has to go through the committee processes. And last year when we were attempting to move it through, It got stuck in a committee and it didn't progress from there. So this year we need it to progress, which is why we've been so active and out there and doing podcasts like this and bringing as much awareness as we can. But once it gets active, then it's going to be called up into each of the committees and talked about in each of the committees, probably 3 committees in the House and 2 or 3 committees in the Senate. And then once it makes its way through the committees, it will go to the House floor where every legislator gets to vote on it. So not just the families that are from Alaska and the Valley, or not Alaska, Anchorage and the Valley and Fairbanks, where there's a lot of midwives, but we need families from Golovin and Delta Junction and Bethel and Kotzebue and Bristol Bay. Like, we need families from everywhere, not just because each of those representatives, they might not have any constituents that are using out of hospital midwifery care because there are no babies being born in their communities.
Right.
They're all being shipped to Anchorage.
Yeah.
So the legislators, when we were able to go to Juneau, we were able to talk to some legislators that served people in those communities, and they were very interested in carrying this bill through because of the huge impact it can make in community healthcare in their communities.
Oh, I just want to say that was a beautiful summary of how a bill becomes a law. I feel like I was going to have to put the Schoolhouse Rock link in the show notes so people could watch that song. But you did an awesome job of summarizing it. It makes a lot of sense.
I've had to explain it to lots of people. And I guess maybe it's my homeschool mom coming out at me that I'm like, look, let's break it down as simple as possible. And I don't have all day to do it. So we're doing it in 2 sentences.
Well, own it. That's amazing. I was going to ask too, if somebody is already receiving midwifery care, I think I heard you guys say there's petitions printed like in offices around town. How is the best thing for them to do is to write a letter, sign the petition. Are there any other ways that people can show support?
Phone calls. They can call their state representatives and senators.
Okay.
Lots of phone calls. Call them every day. Okay. Call them every day. Tell them, hey, that midwifery bill is coming, or it's there, and here's the number, and we want you to support it.
Yep.
And have grandma call, and have your sister call, and have your uncle call. Every day.
Every day.
Pester them.
Yes.
Yep. The more phone calls they get, the more they realize that they need to start paying attention to.
Because it would be a big deal if they had 10 phone calls a day in each office. But wouldn't it be even bigger deal if they had 100 phone calls a day in every office? And each phone caller said, I want you to support this midwifery bill. This is really important for me. That way they know that they have the numbers, but they also have very interested constituents. Like, we're not just bystanders here.
They're paying attention. Right.
Active participants.
Right.
Kind of a little bit like midwifery care, right?
Yes.
You want your clients to be active participants in their care.
Right.
It's funny how life works a lot like birth, I feel like. So what happens, not to be a negative Natalie, but what happens if it doesn't pass? What happens if it doesn't pass?
Unfortunately, our board is also in, could be sunsetting this June if we do not get statute. The statute changes because this is a combined bill of statute change and board extension.
Okay, what does that mean?
Meaning if our board, because our board, they call it a sunset. Basically, it's in the process of going away. So if we don't get this bill to pass in June, our our sunsetting begins, meaning they kind of wind down the clock and we have 1 year to get things taken care of, which would be statute change.
Yeah.
Right? So
then does licensing go away if the board doesn't exist?
It could.
Nobody really knows.
If our board sunsets. Well, we've been given 3 options because it's an unknown of which direction it could go. It could stay exactly as it is, except there wouldn't be a board. Right. So we would still could be legal, but yet there's no one to ever update statutes or regulations.
Which is problematic.
It's problematic. then, or we could be taken over by another board, like the medical board or the board of nursing, which that could be an interesting ride.
Yeah.
Or the board could cease to exist and they just cancel it altogether, which would then mean they have the option of making us illegal, which is kind of what we were talking about earlier, where we're not illegal, but we're not licensed. Or they could make us illegal, meaning we couldn't practice legally in the state, which would mean midwifery would go away.
And on that note, I'll interject too. We don't know what will happen because the administrative state, the big administration of the state of Alaska, would at that point just be making decisions. So the state of Alaska division of boards and professional licensing would be making those decisions for us. The benefit of having a board, and you're a physical therapist, so you fall under the
exercise physiologist. Actually,
do you fall under the physical therapist board?
I'm not professionally licensed.
Okay. So you're not professionally licensed, so you don't have a board. So the benefit of having a board for your professional license is that the board is a board of your peers. They understand what you do. They understand your scope of practice, what you can do, what you can't do, what you shouldn't do, who you should be referring to if you need to. When you don't have a board, who is making any of those decisions? And do we want to just be doing whatever? So boards are important. We have seen in other states that their midwifery board dissolved, and it has not worked out well for the families and midwives of those states.
Wow. Yeah, it seems, largely beneficial to have people who are affected by the statutes be part of the decision-making process. And the constituents as well being very active.
Right.
So everybody listening, this is imperative. This is life-changing for a lot of people, actually. To put that significance on it, I feel like is necessary because it changes how people come into this world and the care options that are offered to women and families. Like it's important. It's very, very important that we get this passed.
Yep.
That's why, like, when you go to the change.org petition, it literally says protecting childbirth options for Alaskan women. That's what we're doing.
Yeah. And even if someone is choosing to birth at the hospital, still sign it because it still gives more options for other people.
Yes.
Like, even if it's not your choice, that's okay, but you have a choice.
Right. Yes.
And that's what it's protecting, right?
And future babies.
Yes.
All of the female babies being born are going to need options when they are our age and having babies.
Right.
Not my your age. Your age and having babies.
If we are only updating these statutes once every 30 years, then this is what my daughter will deliver her babies under, or if she chooses to go with a midwife.
Oh, wow. Because she will have options.
She will have the option. She better.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Wow. Well, thank you both for being so involved and working hard and literally coming to this interview on very little sleep after having a couple of middle of the night babies in the last few days. I'm honored that you guys would come here, and I am really excited to push this out and see the change that happens because we're just going to get this passed. That's what I'm hanging on to.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yep.
Yeah.
It'll happen.
Cool.
Thank you, Natalie.
It will.
Awesome.
Yeah,
you are very
Natalie.
welcome.
This was great.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening and for choosing to take action to actually make a difference in the birth options for women in this country. I hope this was informative and inspiring to you to help make a difference and get this bill passed. I'll put a link to both Rachel and Mary's sites and social pages, as well as the template letter and change.org petition in the show notes for this episode. Please remember that what you hear on this podcast is not medical advice, but remember to always do your own research and talk to your healthcare team, hopefully some midwives in there, before making some important decisions about your wellness. If you found this podcast helpful, please consider writing a 5-star review in your favorite podcast app, subscribing on YouTube, or sharing with a friend. Thank you so much for listening. I'll catch you next time.